I'm Mel Stewart, and this is SwimSwam podcast. Joining me today is the professor of swimming, the maestro of speed, four-time Olympic medalist, three-time Olympic champion, the oldest man to ever win an individual Olympic gold medal, Anthony Ervin.
Hello, Mel.
So I'm going to do some full disclosures in the beginning of this. I've done many clinics. I've done many moments, working with USA Swimming or working in clubs, and I've stood on deck for people for 10 hours. And I would have to say that the most fun I ever had doing that was with you. I think we're in Colorado Springs, and we did it with a big group of kids, and then we went out to like Dave and Buster's, and for a period of time hanging with you, I felt like I was a 12-year-old age group swimmer, and it was bliss.
You know what? Now that you bring that up, I remember that too. We were running around playing video games, just deliberately forgetting our mature selves for a little while. Yeah,
it was fun. So I'm bringing you on because I often say that I hate sprinters. And I actually saw you on another podcast where you were talking with a lot of peers, and you were very sensitive about sprinting. And the truth is, it's pure jealousy, and my knowledge of speed is so weak. I Googled questions for 50 free sprinters right before you came on. It's like I could do if I swam a 200-yard freestyle. And I went out in that 200 free, and then I swam a 50 free. The difference between the 50 free and the first 50 of the 200 free would be nothing. That's my knowledge base, and there are a lot of us out. There are a lot of us out there like that.
That begs the question, even from me, is do you mean there would be no difference in your effort level, or there'd be no difference in your time, but the effort could be radically different?
The effort level sprinting was much higher. Like, I'm going for it. I'm digging in and I'm going for it. The time would be essentially the same. It'd be faster in the 50, but if I put it in fifth gear and try and do it, it's just not there. But if I relax into a rhythm that I understand as a mid-distance swimmer, I almost achieve that speed on the front end of a 200 freestyle. And that's not uncommon. I hear, if I talk to Tom Malchow, if I talk to any distance swimmer, and they're like, yeah, that's right. I understand. And as a sprint man, does that even make sense to you?
I mean, I get it because I've seen it, but but I wouldn't say I experienced that so much. I'd rather. I have to take it into the realm of I've experienced that when I'm trying to get into shape, right? And so as having had a very lengthy and up and down career, it's those periods like when I'm in the trough and really, really out of shape where I feel like I would try harder but get worse outcomes, when I'd really want to just like find my rhythm and pace myself to get my conditioning underneath me. And then once the conditioning's there, then I can begin really honing in on the technique. And so I guess the first lesson in sprinting, if I'm Professor Sprinter or whatever it is that you opened for me, it's like everything comes with a context, right? Like every swimmer is at a certain phase, whether that's physical conditioning or even like your mental conditioning or mental acuity for taking this on. So what you'd want to do next really depends on where you are now.
Okay.
So there's no cookie cutter formula for it, is kind of like my point. I can't just tell you, oh, just do this and expect you to be like, oh, now I know how to sprint.
Well, I want to get into some details in the beginning, but we're going to start off with really dumb questions because you never know. There might be a 12-year-old listening or a new coach. But toward the end of our talk, I'm hoping you'll bring us your wisdom through the lens of some of your performances. And but let's ask a dumb question. Do you feel anything when you swim a 50 free at a World Championships or an Olympic Games? Is there when you have all that output and all that nitro, what is the experience when you touch the wall? Are you feeling pain?
No, no pain, no pain. Usually I'm pretty good at targeting, and that's what I think of. The sports calendar is about targeting those particular events, right? You have like your 4-year calendar, you have your single year calendar for something like a World Championships. And so it's kind of like target practice, right? Like you're trying to hit that bullseye, and you're a particular distance from it. And a lot of what happens between those 2 points, like where you are now versus that calendar point, I really just conceive of that as training. So during a lot of those performances along the way, there will be pain because my conditioning is there in one place, but not in another. But when I get to like the big show, there's no pain in the 50 free. If there's pain, I messed up. I'm doing it wrong. Like the pain of fatigue, or like of dying, as we call it in swimming.
Which frankly is frightening to me. It's your how you feel, and I was mid distance, so how you feel is, and as pain enters your body, those are cues to say hold your stroke, keep your body position, and use everything that you do in terms of training to keep you in place. But it's and I think it would be maddening to be world class in a sprint, and it seems like you vibrate in a rhythm, and then boom, it's over, and you had to do everything perfectly.
Well, you do everything as perfectly as you know how up to that point, right? And I haven't even been afraid of making changes between prelims to semifinals to finals within one meet, right? So there's all kinds of calculated risks you take in like assessments of what you did before to continue to advance. But yeah, as far as like, the pain and the fatigue from a 50 free, no. But as you kind of like opened up with, when you're finding your rhythm, you're doing it right, and it doesn't hurt as much. And it's like that for me for a 50 free at the end of a season.
When you've achieved so much in the 50, you have knowledge that you've forgotten more about this than some people will ever know. When you see other athletes sprinting, you're like, oh, that's that stroke, and like in your brain you're like, that's that style, and do you recognize different styles and what they're doing in a blink? I'll say this, I don't understand that, but when I saw you sprint, it looked silky, it looked smooth when you were on, and some people don't always look silky smooth, but it seems like there was something else going on. It was like a tiny percentage dial, and I'm like, ooh, Tony's on. Do you see that, and do you categorize that in your mind, different styles of sprinters?
Yes. So I definitely can watch other sprinters, and I then set that up with like a style of how they're doing it, or or at least I'm assuming I think I see how they're doing it, where their real strengths are, perhaps where their weaknesses may be. As for me and I'm old school, Mel. I'm the old guy, and I come from the end of the last kind of era where I wasn't in swimming because I was strong, right? So building strength wasn't ever like the easiest thing for me to do. I feel like these next generations of sprinter, like building size and muscular power and strength is a little bit more natural for them. And so I always focused on my technique, and then I brought strength kind of on the tail end of that, trying to coordinate the strength with the technique. You have to make the technique new as you acquire more strength. For me, it had to be about efficiency. I couldn't just brute force my way to the end of a race and expect to be ahead of the others, right? And deep down, I am competitive. I try to put that aside when I'm in the moment of just getting it done. But in order to be my best, I knew I couldn't lead with power. I had to lead with precision and reinforce it with power.
Did you ever have your fast twitch fibers measured? Did you vertical leap test? And like Dressel's a 42-inch vertical leap. Do you know what your vertical leap is? Did you ever?
No.
No, you don't. Mine's
No,
six
it was
inches.
so non-impressive that I kept no record of it in this vault up here, and nobody wrote that one down.
You should just be like, you should just come out and say, "Oh, my vertical leap was 46 inches." Just that's what I remember because you won at 35, you won at 19, you won at 35, but now now you're entering your icon phase where it's like, the master, and you can just say, 46 inches. It's
Is
recorded
that what you do,
somewhere.
Mel?
What's
You
that?
just is
That's how
that
you
what
do
you
it.
do?
That's how
You
you do it.
just
So okay. So in terms of speed and power, is it, do you like, once again, mid-distance swimmer? For me, it was, I was a terrible puller. And my freestyle came on when I 6-speed kick and I drive it. So I was very legs driven. If you had to critique your own stroke, how would you describe the Ervin 50 free style?
the Ervin 50 freestyle would be, as long as while I'm getting stronger, I know I can apply more power to the water and apply the same amount of new energy to being efficient and to staying as small in the water, right? To bend the sensation, my ability to feel with my body in the water, to make sure I'm not taking up too much space, that I'm not creating drag with my own body, that I'm using this new power to get out of the way of hostile forces, in addition to creating force of propulsion. So yeah, it's always about doing more with less and then acquiring more so you can do even more with that. Just this I don't know how else to describe it, but it's like a fixation on efficiency, and not on waste.
We just talked to Fred Busquet, and we had him on, first man under 21 seconds, 50-meter free. And when I think of his stroke, he was not the biggest guy in the world. But his stroke seemed so big, and it seemed like he was wider. It seemed like it was very straight armed. It seemed like a big stroke. And what I just heard from you was you tried to get smaller, like in the barrel, smaller, moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a very different style. Is it? Do you ever see elite swimmers and be like, they're doing what I did, or that's a completely different style?
Oh, well, everybody has to, of course, there were plenty of people that looked at what I did, especially back in the day, like in 2000, and looked at whatever the technical differences they thought I was doing that others hadn't before me, and you imitate them. And I think part of the developmental process for every young swimmer is that you imitate and get better. You imitate and you assimilate and you kind of amalgamate and put together the people that came before you, until one day you kind of recognize that it's just you. And at that point forward, you need to be really your own artist, and you need to be able to create your own style from that, and be able to verify and just keep building on it. So, as far as Fred Busquet, I mean, to be honest, he was active, or at least at his strongest point, when I was out of the sport. He was in like the suit era, right? So, when I came back and I saw the suit stuff and like the incredible things that have been happening, but also kind of like watching some of the swimming and being like, those super suits really were able to add a particular kind of like strength to you. And when it was taken away, but it was just like one piece. It was like one piece of the technique. It's like, you don't need to worry about this anymore. You can focus on then all the other letters of the alphabet, but this letter is taken care of. So maybe it just looked like a different kind of stroke. I've never even worn one, so I can't really say much more other than just like what I may have seen and how I can overlay some philosophy onto it.
You're a purist because of history.
Nah.
No, 19 years old, you tie with Gary Hall, and then at 35, you do it as a, let's in my opinion, I was angry and bitter. I wanted you to win in 12, but you came back and did it in 16. Very, very dramatic. What's the difference between 19-year-old Tony and that kind of speed and where with your mind body connection and who you were, and sprinter at 35? What's the deal? Is a stroke? How much has this stroke changed?
My stroke, I think it changed a lot. If I look at it, it probably looks similar, and our memories aren't great. That like I can barely remember what happened in Rio in 2016, let alone back in 2000. But as I got older, as I got stronger, my body changed. Just like the experiences I put my body through, even when I wasn't swimming, changed my body. The environment itself changed, the environment of the sport, right? Just the facilities, the pools changed. The blocks were very different. The tech suits that we currently wear were still quite a degree more advanced than what we were wearing back in 2000. So not even talking about the super suits, but that changes what we're adapting to in the water. So moreover, just like the sciences of nutrition and supplementation had advanced and taken a lot of twists and turns and whatever was that became the flavor of the year. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I feel like it was completely different. If I look at my technique and what I'm feeling for, like those first principles for me remained the same, but how those first principles got rendered into how I actually practice them were different, I think, by a lot across the 16 years.
Physically, at 19, to me, you look like a little boy. I'm not going to say you, I think you were. To me, you look childlike. And when I think of you at 35, okay, no, you're not I wouldn't peg you as this is the power guy in the final by any stretch of the imagination. However, you got swole. You really, you were definitely a man. Do you know, in terms of comparison, like this body weight, is how much more power, how much more muscle you put on your body?
Yeah, pretty much 20 pounds difference, I would say. I was like maybe a buck 65. I built up to 165 going into, I think, Olympic trials in 2000. During taper, I always had a trouble keeping that weight on. So I probably raced at around 160. And then in Rio, I was pushing myself over 180. And it, I don't think it really dropped below that when it came to race day.
I think
I had a little girdle of fat around me. I learned to accept that. There's a certain vanity that comes into play when you're an athlete, especially a professional athlete, if you have to do photo shoots and whatnot. So, you kind of, you fall into the trap of venerating kind of like this chiseled look where the muscles, you can see the shape of them when really you're probably at your healthiest and you can perform at your best if it's a little bit softer and smoother all the way around. But I learned to accept that in my older age.
Mike Behrman, Olympic champion, 200-meter breaststroke, 92, really exceptional talent. He used to say the same thing. I always thought it was a cop-out. I just thought he liked eating hamburgers, and he just told himself that. But since you said it, I'm actually, I have a lot of respect for you, buddy. So I'm going to take you at your word.
Yeah, you got to do it. Stress isn't good for you. If you have to carry too much stress in the system, you don't recover as well. You're not as sharp. You're a little bit more jittery, or you're sharp, but it's an uncontrolled sharpness. So you want to have a little bit of comfort if you really want to be your best in that kind of environment.
$160, Olympic champion, 50 free, 19. I'm like, is anyone going to win an Olympic medal in a men's 50 free that's 160 pounds? Who out there is like that? Nobody's there. And I think that's another metric that you should be like, you need to like put that on your Instagram handle. Just my 2 cents, buddy.
Hey, we all have to work with what we got, right? I think that's what, if we're talking if there's a 12-year-old out there listening right now, you're still figuring out what you've got. I'm still figuring out what I've got. You learn to work with it. You make the best of it. You find examples that may have been like you. You learn from them, and then at the end, you have to be able to make it your own. But there is no one size fits all. It's your size. Your size can fit it all. You just got to find your own way.
Michael Phelps is standing on deck with you, and he's like, you know what? I'm been seventh at the wall, eighth at the wall in the 100-meter butterfly or whatever 100 he's doing, definitely 100-meter free. And then you have to rely on everything coming home. And I own that last 15 meters, but I really would like to get out faster. If this is the experience of a lot of us. If you were giving a clinic to an elite who was in that bucket, what are the first few things that you would teach them?
On how to be faster in the first 15?
Well, how to be faster. Like, there's a lot of swimmers who fake a sprint. Like they're last at the wall at the 50 and 100 meters, but they can come home. They really don't have the sprint gear. What do you do to what are a few Ervin techniques to be like, hey, this will get you out faster?
Well, I'd say that you, first off, what you think I'm doing is you're wrong, because I build a 50 freestyle. I come home strong, except it's not home. I'm going and I'm not coming back, and I'm going there and I'm leaving strong, leaving the other side of the pool strong.
That is the first mistake that folks make who don't sprint. They get in and they're just like 0 to 60, they're off. And I have heard you say that you build the 50. I heard a lot of people say they build the 50. So you're building it, but you're moving into your rhythm very, very quickly.
Yeah.
When you're in a 50 sprint, is there any thought at all? What's going through your head? It's going to be over in 20 seconds.
It's just to use business vernacular. It's just like I'm an operator, right? I'm operating all the pieces, whatever, there's any number of stages for me, for a 50 free. The more stages that I can identify to do something useful, then the more complexity I can add to it and have the very simple result at the end. But during the race, it's really just, I'm kind of just managing the sensations I expect to feel, and making sure I'm capturing them as I move from one stage of the race to its finish. But I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm certainly not thinking about anything human, right? Like I'm not having emotions. I'm not thinking about any kind of future. I'm completely locked in the moment, just dealing with the machine of my own body. All the emotions and stuff, that's before and it's after. But during those 20 seconds, I at least have enough control to maintain it for that long.
Are you, when you're in this 20-second bubble of just speed that's building,
building the effort, the velocity is not building.
Okay. Are you like, if you're making a micro mistake, are you like, ooh, is that registering? You're like, that wasn't right.
Micro mistake? No.
Yeah, no. You're not
just major mistakes.
Just major mistakes. So it's something where it's like you have to get out of the pool, go down and see the replay to see, okay, this was wrong. This is at the
yeah, you're often not aware of micro mistakes. Yeah, it would take review to identify the micro and then overlay that into the next one. Try to make that change.
Do you have a particular race where you're like, okay, that was fast, but here's the, if you're going down into, and review your video and you pop a great 50, but you made mistakes. What would you see?
From video, I guess I would video outside analysis. I was always looking more at my start, to be honest with you, and what was going on there. Because as it turned out, it was a lot of the energy that I would use, whether for better or for worse on the start, had an effect, like an energy economic effect by the end of the 50, right? So figuring out what's going on in the beginning, what affects how I feel. And so I always felt it was very important to do that kind of video review, like right after the race, while the memory of what was going on is still in my body. So then I can make decisions on how to do it next, and then I jump back in the pool from like a little bit of a warm up post race. It'd be like a little bit of post race warm down just to flush, not think too much, get out, watch the video, compare with what I saw in the video with what I remember feeling with my body, then get back in the water, trying to, it's like, all right, so this is how I'm going to deal with what I consider this micro like flaw or like error that I made. And kind of like try to embed it in muscle memory with that warm down and feel good about it when I get out. And so that's like the last thing my body remembers is fixing that micro.
You are working the algorithm. That's interesting. I mean, I have never heard someone say that they would warm down, review video, and then jump back in and swim again to lay down the neural pathways.
Yeah, just on the technique component. Yeah.
Do you know of anyone else who's done that? Any other elites who do that?
I don't know. No.
There you go, folks. This is the professor of fast swimming, the maestro of speed. I think that's interesting. It's always that you always wonder about elites and what they do that's just a little bit different. And I think that's pretty cool. That was a great nugget. Thank you, sir. Let's talk about 2012 and that start.
Oh, okay.
The first question, of course, is, you've probably talked about this endlessly. I audibly yelled. I was so emotionally caught up in that race because we are caught up in the 50. It is prime time television, and when you flinched, what's going on in your brain? You have to be aware of what happened. What's going on in your brain from that point through to touching the wall? How does it affect you?
Are you talking about the final?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have to rewind a little bit. And in semifinals, I had sublexed my shoulder. So I have had a bad shoulder, although it's kind of like the least of my major problems with my body now because I know how to manage it better. And yeah, it's sublexed, and that hadn't happened too many times. So immediately after that semifinal race, like there was a lot of pain, a lot of inflammation in the shoulder, and then a lot of fear, right? Pain, I mean, what an incredible controller of you or shaper direction that you take your mind and your spirit when you're in pain, right? And pain management wasn't something that I really felt like I needed to understand when I was younger, but as I get older, it's becoming more and more relevant as that can kind of like, my physical pain can infect the lives of like my family. So anyways, this is not important for you 12-year-olds. But so I was in such pain and such fear and I hadn't been able to really clear that out completely despite the best intentions of the staff that were holding my hand through that. And so I was fearful when I stood up on that block, not fearful of any kind of result, like race results, performance result, but fearful that my arm was going to fall out again. And I was going to be in agonizing pain midair, potentially, I guess, just like catastrophic landing in the water. So I was dealing with that, and I was just so, yeah, I didn't even want to grab the block because I was afraid if I grabbed it, then my hand will stay there, but the arm will come out. And I just lost my balance. So I was kind of like weaving, and yeah, I could very well have been disqualified there. Maybe the officials give me a pass because clearly my movement did nothing but hurt me in the final results.
What happens? What happens when you hit the water and you know you've made a mistake like that? You
mean when I sublexed?
Yeah. Well, you said you're an operator. When you're doing your 50, you're an operator. So what happens to the operation? How is the operations affected in that 50 meters? What was going through were you going crap, or when you were swimming?
Well, with the actual sublexing one, the adrenaline kicked in, and like the panic system, the true fight or flight system took over at that point. I had never really felt that before in the pool, and there was a strange clarity with that, from what I recall, as I tried to really gather the pieces back together and get back on with the race. With the final, I don't really remember I mean, me having a bad start is not like a fresh or unique situation for me. Or let's just say a slow start. Me having a slow start is not a unique situation for me. There was a certain comfort, I guess, in knowing that my arm was in its socket as I entered the water, even if I was behind. And so it was like operations as normal, I guess, from that point. But when things kind of go sideways, um, I trained for that. I feel like my teams have always trained for that kind of operating, even in we do like these power sets, and there's always been a battery of drills where we would just be floating static, and you have to go from zero to holding and carrying as much water and propelling yourself with as much velocity as possible. No wall involved, no block involved. Like these are drills. These are like sprinter drills that we would do, going from zero to max. So, yeah, I don't know. I answered that in any number of ways. But yeah, you train for that. The operator in you trains for that, for whatever can happen.
In terms of your coaching, and is there any way, you were with Marsh for a while, I was with Marsh for a while, I understand what he's about. Is there you're a co-creator, I know, in your training. I know you're driving a lot of your workouts, but what's what did you gain from each coach that were like, hey, this is a keeper, it's always going to be with me, this is always going in the operating system?
Okay. I mean, they're all very important. Important for me because of whatever I was going through. And I wouldn't say, I've always been co-author. That becomes a little bit like stronger and more on the surface of it as you get towards the end of the season. I take a little bit more charge, and I lean more on the coaches during the training side, my teammates on the training side, to make sure I'm putting in enough effort to actually build up. Let's see, Mike Bottom. I'll start with Mike Bottom, right? Mike Bottom was, he was the psychologist. He was able to speak to me like the tempestuous son that I was, not even really wanting to swim and to be in the sport, and finding a way to reverse psychology that into making me engaged and making me really like passionate about pursuing it, right? Because back in 2000, sprinting wasn't looked at the way it is now, right? College coaches didn't really recruit for swimmers 20 years ago, or for sprinters. I mean, they wanted just 200 and up guys. Even like if you swam to 200, if that was your best event in high school, you were a sprinter. And so it was a different kind of like recruiting and just in seeing and swimming and what was like respected and kind of what was grudgingly accepted. And that's changed. So, but Mike was at the beginning of that, of like acceptance for who I was and allowing me to really thrive in that. And so I was able to reach like a whole nother level of potential because of it. And it imbued like a positivity into my own curiosity about how swimming technique works. That has always stayed with me, right? That wasn't, maybe that was there as a developmental, like in high school, but it wasn't like conscious. I wasn't aware of my own curiosity. I didn't deliberately try to like pump oxygen into that. But because of Mike, it was like it became like a deliberate understanding of fueling your own curiosity. See, fast forward, actually, when I first returned to the sport, it was with Terry McKeever, there was a very strong like maternal instinct where she told me after the fact, like, post London, and that she knew the day that I got back in the water completely out of shape, that I still had the gift, and that I could be at the Olympic trials, if not the Olympics again. Like she said, she knew right away. She did not tell me that because she knew how brittle I was, that there was still like a very small, scared child in me. And that if she came out right away, be like, you could be Olympic champion again, Anthony, that I would have folded like a house of cards. She knew that. And so she nurtured me and really tried to allow me to be in an environment where I was enjoying what I was doing. And it wasn't about the competition of it. And that was great. And that was necessary. And she saw that, like she knew that that was deliberate on her part. A year with her about, and then I was right. I was like, you know what? I should actually give this a go. And in January, or like December, January of the Olympic year of 2012, that's when I joined Dave Durden. And with that, it was, you know, Dave has great charisma on deck. He's actually very motivational when it comes to those, the training days that require emotion, right? Like test set days, like he's great on deck for that. All the other days, like, you know, training days, and the way he designs his workout, I can completely see where he comes from, the engineering background, right? Like I can see the models at work every day. I knew what to expect. There was a reliability with that. And with that kind of reliability, it makes it easier to put in the work. You know, and that's almost like the sprinter's version of becoming a middle distance or a distance swimmer. See, from Durden, I went down to Salo, and Salo, I learned a lot of things there, but I haven't thought about that in a while. But it was a great opportunity because I was coaching at the same time as that as well. So I got to look kind of like behind the curtain of how these coaches, like at a collegiate level or elite level, how they actually think about like what they're doing, how they're operating as coaches amongst each other to deal with all these talented swimmers who all have their own needs. They all have their own desires. They all have their own insecurities. And learning how to like effectively manage that and bring the most out of it, you know. Then I went to David Marsh, right? And for me, that was, it almost felt like this was something that was meant to happen for a long time, because I knew that, you know, Mike had gotten his start as a sprint coach, you know, over at Auburn with David Marsh, and the same thing with Dave Durden. Dave Durden, you know, actually he came up coaching first, I think, with Salo. He was one of Salo's assistant coaches, and then he went under David. And for me, it was like being there was like, I was like putting those pieces together. It's like, oh, Mike got this from David, but David's way of doing it is like X. So it's like I can almost see the second generation of X in Mike, and then the second generation of Y from David and Durden. But it all kind of goes back to Marsh and seeing he's like the mad professor, right? And at the same time, like a gambler. And I thought we had a great relationship, right? Just like being able to talk curiously around things, and I had a confidence with how I wanted to co-write, you know, in the late stage, and it seemed very easy. And he had a way of really helping me address my my Achilles heel, which had always been my start. And once he brought in the piece of not technique of, what's the word? Anyway, it's called the Kistler. It's a piece of computerized equipment, allowed us to do data with video. And I was able for the first time to really figure out where I was losing all my speed on the start, right? Because I was hitting it analog before. I was like, just got to like try harder, push more, kick harder. And that was like the wrong approach. And that's everything what I don't do while I'm swimming, but I felt I had to do that in the land component, in the transition component. But with this piece of equipment, I saw where the flaw was. And it was like a eureka moment. And David told me, he's like, okay, well, now that you know what's wrong, let's rebuild the start from the very beginning. And he sent me to the little kiddie pool where they teach some lessons. It's only like 3 feet deep. And he's like, all right, stand at the edge. I'm like, okay. It's like, all right, now get down on one knee. I'm like, okay, I get down on one knee, 1 foot on the edge. It's like, put your arms up in the streamline. Now fall in the pool. Don't hit the bottom. And I'm like, well, this is how I taught kids how to do their start when I was doing swim lessons in New York, like the very beginning. He's like, yep, this is what we're doing at the very beginning. We're going to start at the very beginning like this. I want you to be thinking about this new discovery, right? Of correcting this flaw. And so I was over there just like a little kid, like a little 6-year-old falling into the pool from one knee over the edge. Did that a dozen times. Then I stood up and went back to the normal pool, standing at the edge, streamline, fall in. Then I was jumping from the edge, and then I was standing on the block doing it, right? And within that one afternoon, it was like I had planted the seeds of putting it into muscle memory of correcting this what for me was an ancient flaw in my start and dive. And there was a confidence in that, but I also knew that I needed to have the openness, the humility, to be treated like a child, right? Like a new beginner. And I know I've encountered this, later down the line. They call it the beginner's mind of not having an ego when you go into something. And it's incredibly hard to have beginner's mind when you view yourself and others view you as being an expert in something, right? And so you don't want to. I don't want to be a victim of that kind of a tragedy when, I don't want to be tied up in the ego of my own greatness. So I kind of just like, all right, let's do it. Let me be a beginner again. And, so there was a sense of rebirth there with David Marsh and that. And as we saw, right, I went to trials, made the team, and then I went to Rio. It's like, there's not much to say about that part of the story. Just like everything operated as it was supposed to. And anything that came along the way, I almost felt like I had built in enough space to deal with any micro problems as they appeared.
For clarity. What was your
Sure.
Achilles heel? The Achilles heel, the flaw.
Drag. So the drag point was I was entering the water, okay, and there was a point where so if this is my hands, tip my finger joint here where the hand meets, those are my hips. There was a point where I'd go in and then I'd turn, and then my legs, my hips down, would go deeper, right? So the whole thing was like, do not let my hips down ever go deeper than the front of my body, right? So it's kind of like just go flatten out and then go up. So, I mean, like on this part of the curve, it's deeper, but that's what I mean. I mean, like the maximum depth. So
For those people who are
like that.
listening on a download, Anthony is basically showing me it's like so your arms, your head, your hips could not go below that parallel, and
That
that would drive
maximum depth.
maximum depth.
Yeah.
Maximum
Or like
depth.
hips can reach the maximum depth, but let's say like knees and toes couldn't go below that, because that becomes like the absolute form of drag.
That
But I
is
couldn't ever feel that. And no coach could ever see that from above the water.
There you go. So you had to watch it. Back to video.
Back to video. And then we had the computational power to actually tell us what exactly the velocity was at every single part of it. And at that point, when my legs went below that threshold, velocity just bottomed out.
We are winding down. We got to close it up. We got about 3 more minutes. Just dumb questions. Meddling at 19, meddling at 35. I mean, I think meddling when you're 35, a full-grown adult, you have so much life experience. That has to be just a completely different experience. What was the an achievement? It has meaning to it. What was different at 35?
At 35, I knew how many incredible people had really helped me reach that point. And I don't mean just my coaches and my teammates, although they were absolutely critical, but just people in my personal life, my friends, my family, those that have stuck with me through the entire 20-year cycle or 16-year cycle or more in the case of my family. So, that's the pure moment of victory for me. Any yells, anything that I let out was to thank them. Deep gratitude. I didn't have that when I was 19.
Humility and gratitude. That's what I'm hearing. We've got about 2 more minutes. What's going on in your life now? What's happening? Are you in the water? Are you?
I am. It's been a little bit more recent. I've been in the water for a few weeks now. I'm spending most of my time really just tending to my family. So I'm actually going to go and pick up my daughter pretty soon from school. And that's the end of my day, right? My time in the office is coming to an end.
Well, if I talk we talked to Natalie, it might have been a month ago, and Natalie's like, I'm like, are you retired? And she goes, no, I'm going to race, and I'm racing as a pro. She goes, I don't know if I'm going to do national teams. I think that's off the table. She goes, but you're going to see me race as pro, and that door is open always. But you have, you redefine everything in age. What's your mindset? Will you race pro, race for money? Will you shoot for a national team? Are you a guy that's going to be 55 and like trying to break the Masters world record? What is your swimming future?
I don't know, Mel. Right? Like I'm not necessarily in charge of whether I can swim pro and swim for money, right? That's kind of an invitation thing. I don't think I have any right to say you have to pay me money if you want me to swim. I do know that swimming and just taking care of my body is important for my health, right? If I let things fall apart, which as they have, through the course of these lockdowns, and I've had to do a couple quarantines now from crossing borders and whatnot, and it just wreaks havoc upon my body, and I'm way unhealthier if I do nothing. So I know I want to take care of myself. I know my mood. I know everything I do outside of the pool is better and more optimistic and more positive for those around me if I am kind of chasing that dragon in the water at least a little bit. What that means, like as far as like racing community, is it just Masters meets? Sure, it will be. Will it be more than that? Am I going to be at trials? I certainly hope so. Will I be in the finals at trials? Well, too early to say for sure. I've never made promises in these kinds of things, Mel.
I'm not asking for promises. I'm just checking on our friend. I love your library. I just have to say it. If you're listening out there and you're not watching the video, it's a well-appointed library behind him. It's beautiful, which is the background.
Yeah, it's a virtual background.
It's a virtual background.
I wish.
You're sweet to come on. I feel like I have a little more knowledge, certainly more respect for you and your process, and hearing about the experience you had with all the coaches. That felt like a master class. Will you come back on for the right topic, buddy?
Sure. It's always good to talk to you, Mel.
You've been listening to the SwimSwam podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. You can take SwimSwam podcast on the go by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Look for links in the description below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as well.